Hi, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. This is the show that goes beyond the data to explore the people, the stories, and the insights that drive true business success. I am your host, Dave Bookbinder, and I really appreciate you joining us today. And today we are going to take a deep dive behind the numbers to explore the people, etc. I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Alise Cortez, who's the Chief Ignition Officer at Gusto now. She's also an author and host of the Working on Purpose podcast. Alise, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's great to be on the other side of the mic.
I was saying before we actually hit the record button, and I've got mic envy. Your mic looks pretty cool too, I must say. So, hey, I did a very, very, very brief intro about who you are. Tell the audience the rest of the story about who you are.
Well, I want to start by saying, Dave, that I am obsessed with the world of work, and that's really my focus. I'm an organizational psychologist, management consultant, and I really am bent on helping organizations create workplaces where people actually want to show up, give their best, and stick around. And so that really speaks to a focus on helping develop leaders, managers, and cultures. And of course, my whole jam is I want those to be cultures of gusto. That's our central focus.
I love that. You know, that resonates here. And anybody listening right now, who wouldn't want all of that for themselves and their organizations, right? So let's talk about how we do that. But let me start off by asking you this, because I speak to a lot of leaders on this program and in my so-called day job life, where I speak to a lot of leaders. And it seems like it's getting harder and harder to really be a leader today. Leadership as a definition is muddy. The expectations are great and varied. And there's so many, I don't want to use the word soft skills, but the essential skills that are defining what you should look like and sound like as a leader. So how hard is it really today to be a leader?
Off the charts. I mean, and we hear this all the time. Like, there's never been a more difficult time. We hear that all across the board and everything. But I completely agree with you, Dave. This is a devastatingly difficult time to be a leader, which is why, for me, the way that I interact and approach leaders is I'm here to help you. This cannot be easy. Your head is swiveling on your neck 16 times just by the time you got up this morning and had your coffee. And so, I mean, it's just the speed at which we're changing, the discerning workforce, very diverse workforce that is much more expressive and demanding. It is very difficult to be a leader today.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've heard you talk about is the idea that leaders tend to often cling to what they call the outdated practices. And will you define what outdated practices are? But then, more importantly, why are leaders still clinging to those if they
Mm.
are outdated?
Yeah, so a couple things, and this is why I so appreciate and I try to do my practice with compassion. We're all humans, and we're really messy, right? And so some of the outdated practices, of course, they stem from whatever the leader went through when they were making their way up in their organizations is what they know. That worked for them, and maybe a lot of these leaders are going to be several decades into their careers. So now we're talking about stuff that worked back in, say, the 80s and the 90s or even the 70s, kind of thing, which surely does not work for today's workforce, the Gen Y, the Gen Zs. So for the first thing is recognizing that you've grown up swimming in this kind of water. This is how you know how to swim. It works for you to swim like this. And so the first opportunity is for leaders to recognize, oh, this is what I'm clinging back to. I remember this. I had to climb the corporate ladder to get to where I am. And there's oftentimes a lot of um, ex- unconscious bias and unconscious beliefs that they don't realize are running them. And so some of those outdated practices would be things like you have to be in the office from 8 to 5 to actually produce results. That is a very much an outdated practice. And the COVID pandemic taught us unequivocally that that is not true. We can produce results without being in a physical locality together. The other thing too is that the idea being that everybody wants the same thing from their work. They want to be able to climb the corporate ladder, to be able to constantly increase their compensation. A lot of people do focus on compensation, but what we're missing is that there are so many ways that people want to participate in the world of work to accommodate the rest of their lives that if you require them to simply come to the office every single day and they're on this career track, you miss a tremendous segment of the population who would like to work with you in, say, maybe a part-time capacity or a project capacity or something like that while they raise their children, care for their elderly parents, handle a disability or a sickness or something like that. And so what happens, what I've seen, Dave, is that so many leaders have this idea of whatever has worked for them or historically in their organizations is the way it needs to be. And that is the stuff that needs to be unlearned and set aside.
Yeah, let me unpack that a little bit with you because you touched on a couple things that really resonate. The return to office thing, I agree with you. I'm of the mindset that there's a hybrid environment that makes the most sense for all. You need to be in the office a little bit to experience the true culture. But to your point, I think we all learned during COVID that we can all be big grown-ups and still be trusted to get our stuff done. And yet I hear, unfortunately, a lot recently about organizations taking these hardline approaches about return to office. Had a meeting with a group just last week, as a matter of fact, that were telling me that their CEO has basically pounded the table, demanded everybody must be here. And their culture is becoming more and more toxic because it's now driven by FaceTime. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember growing up where FaceTime was such an important thing. You had to be seen, be there early, be there late. But I saw the most hardcore FaceTime focused investment bankers understand and come around during COVID that their people could be trusted. So what's happening here?
Mm. I really appreciate that question. It's really, really meaty and important. Well, the first thing, and you've said it already, but not in the same words that I've been talking about it, is they're managing by presenteeism, not by productivity. So we're focused on the wrong thing. If we're focused on seeing your face, that's the wrong thing to focus on. I think what we're paying you for is not your pretty face, but rather what are your head, heart, and hands producing? So we have to focus on what is it that you want to see this person produce for you? What's the measurable outcome? If we focus on that, it doesn't matter where the work gets done. In fact, you'll be delighted to know that my last night's podcast was about the concept of work from anywhere. Um, Raj Chowdhury has written a book called that. The world is your office, and it's about the whole work from anywhere concept. So, and you're spot on, right, Dave? What's happening is we're seeing this back to clinging to the way things used to work for me. And this is what I know. I only know things work really well when I see my people working, and therefore I trust them. If we take that and now we say that you have to come back to the office, you're right. Now we're seeing all this resentment, and we're seeing that that's a toxicity. There isn't a psychological safety to speak up. There are some very well-known companies that I won't actually mention that are seeing this. They're doing employee engagement surveys where their people are saying very loudly, we don't like this. We don't want to come back to the office full time. Grateful to be working with you. And the CEO is saying, I don't care what you think. I
Yeah,
don't care how you
I'll
feel
call it
about
out
this.
for you because I wrote about it on LinkedIn. You're
Okay, please
talking
do.
about AT&T,
I
right?
certainly am, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And so I'm looking at that. I'm like, gosh, I really don't understand how much more data you need from this. So now what you're getting is now there's so much to unpack with that, Dave. So one, you have a resentful workforce who now maybe is there, but maybe like when we're all children, we're like, you're making me do this, but I'm not gonna really do it. So maybe then you don't get the full effort. They're present, but maybe not fully participating. And I'm going to guess that many of them are looking for another opportunity. So now you're also at half mast there. Also, the people that you required to come back, are those the very, very best people that you need in your organization? Have you chosen, the A talent for all the right places that you need A talent? Or just the ones that could handle working in this kind of a very stringent capacity? So I think it's a terrible mistake that's being made. And it's at the expense of having what we learned from going through the pandemic together about how much the workforce has evolved and how they want to live full lives. They're happy to have jobs. They want to have jobs. They want to contribute. They need the income. But if they can make that work with the rest of their lives, you're going to get a much more engaged, productive human being in the process.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And I often talk about, and you mentioned here, the idea that you can work from anywhere. Good news is you can work from anywhere, right? With technology. Bad news is you can work from anywhere. And there's sort of an expectation that you will.
Yeah.
And I saw another recent post on LinkedIn or a story of someone who shared their commentary about a return to office sort of situation where they wanted you to be in the office full time, and yet they were getting phone calls from their managers after hours at home, and somebody probably made a flippant remark about, well, you don't want us to work from home, so I can't take your call here. I'm at home now. And they and their colleagues were summarily dismissed.
Wow.
Did you see that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, that's crazy ridiculous, but that's where we are. It seems like the pendulum has swung way back further from the shift that we saw during COVID, where there was the quiet quitting phenomenon, and now it's gone back to the control, the command and control leadership style.
I think what may be under that, at least partially so, Dave, could be that, when we resort to those kind of practices when we feel like we're in a corner, where we're afraid. So that goes back to being why it's hard to be a leader today. So much pressure to produce results for shareholders, for all the other stakeholders, et cetera. So much pressure on leaders, and so that's when I think we see a lot of these behaviors. Is like, I don't know what else to do. I'm just going to go back to what I think knows to work, and then that tendency to produce that hard line, either you will or you're out kind of thing. I think that is partially an expression and an indication of the kinds of stress that I think leaders are under when they start to behave like that or communicate like that. But the ripple effect is terrible. Now we were talking about it, and the employees are feeling this. It's got to be terribly demoralizing. Now we create a culture of fear because now we realize we can't speak up. So now creativity goes down because you're not going to go out on a limb and take a risk because we're afraid here about what we're doing, what we're saying, and what we're doing. So the ripple effects are tremendous when we start to behave in these old command and control kinds of ways.
Yeah, and I saw a new term that sort of depicts that whole scenario. Quiet cracking, I think it was called.
Yes, I've been following that as well.
Yeah, that's just what we need, another term to describe a bad mental health situation for our workforce, right?
Right, right. And going back to the spirit of this conversation is if we can help support our employees by helping make the rest of their lives work a little bit more easily, because maybe they're not commuting 5 days a week, or you allow them to start rather than the hard 8 o'clock, then 9 o'clock after they've dropped off their kids at school, so that they don't have to actually pay somebody else to do that or whatever it costs for them to make that all work. Now you can reduce some of that quiet cracking. You're not making it so hard to get to work and produce results.
Yeah, I've shared this before. I'll share it again. As a single dad for a decade, I was lucky enough to work for some leaders who led with empathy, really understood I had some special circumstances, and gave me the flexibility to do what I needed to do. And man, I would walk through fire for those people. When you talk about discretionary effort, employee engagement, going above and beyond, I lived all that for them because I appreciated what they were doing for me.
Absolutely. Well, and that goes back, Dave, to this whole notion that you've heard me talk about it. I'm going to guess that you're pretty aligned on as well, is the notion of leading for the whole person in your people, seeing them as whole entire beings that have life goals and ambitions and things to deal with. And, gosh, did you know that they actually want to have some time to exercise and enough time to sleep? And it would be great if they could prepare a meal and go see their kid's soccer game on occasion. And so if we, and this is of course what I espouse when I'm advocating and counseling my clients, is if you can look at your people as whole individuals and think about how can you make their whole life's work better, like your employer sounds like they did for you, you have just what you said. You have somebody who's committed to you, who will, go the extra mile for you. And isn't that what you want? And to talk to other people about how great you are when you're not even around.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about something that you mentioned in your opening here about how to bring meaning into work for people. I hear it all the time that people want more than just to be doing a thing, a function, making a widget, what have you. How do we bring meaning into the job while recognizing we still got to get stuff done?
Yeah, lots of different ways. And the first thing we have to say is, everybody experiences meaning on a different level. And let me back up and go a little bit geeky on you because I'm a logotherapist. So that's really logos is Greek for meaning. So it's vitalizing through meaning essentially. But through that lens, we have three sources of meaning available to us. It's And they're all registered along that which we value. So what you find meaningful, Dave, could be different from what I find meaningful because we have different values. That's really important to know. It's not a one size fits all. So I really value, for example, intellectual study and rigor, and I'm sure you do too. And so that's why I keep researching and writing books and hosting my podcast. Somebody else might, I really value competition. So I want to be part of a really competitive crew kind of thing. So we have to recognize that meaning is registered on a very, very individual level, and you can't assume what is meaningful to someone. You have to really understand and ask and engage them with that. So once we understand what is meaningful, it could be as simple as I value kindness. So it would be really meaningful to me, boss, if you came in or when we first started our days together, that you just check in with me and ask how I am. Right. So that would be a meaningful exchange. But you can't do that unless you understand what is meaningful or of value to the person. So that's simple start to all that. Beyond that, in a more grand or macro sort of fashion, we look at say, the science of mattering, which really speaks to how do we know we matter. Most people want to matter in whatever way is important to them. People might say, I want people to feel like I'm smart. I want people to know that I'm capable. I want people to know that I have great ideas. So however it is that we want to matter, again, goes back to the values piece. But the two components of mattering are knowing that we are valued, you care about me like your employer did of you, and knowing that we add value. And so the way that we can help people feel like their work is more meaningful is that we share with them how they are valued. Dave, for example, I've already told you, I really enjoy your sense of humor. You're very quick wit. I like that about you. I've seen that about you. I like it. And I'm telling you that, and because to me, it's a way to honor who you are while I enjoy that aspect of you. So that's about knowing that you're valued. And then if the saying bit of the way that you add value is the way that you've contributed and performed. If it hadn't been for you, or if you hadn't had that great idea, we would have never hit this mark. Those are all ways to convey that people matter. And that elevates their sense of that this is a meaningful use of my time. I have meaningful work. I have a meaningful relationship with my colleagues, my boss. And that's how we start to get and we, what I like to say, activate meaning in the everyday.
Yeah. Can I gently push back on you? And you said something about the employee asking their boss, saying something to the effect of, I value kindness and I appreciate it if you would check in with me first before you just asked me how many widgets I produced last week. I get that. And on behalf of everybody who heard that and goes, man, I could never do that because that's awkward for me. My boss is going to think I'm squishy and a weakling. How do you navigate that?
Wow. First, let me just celebrate how you asked that question. When you said you were going to push back on me, I didn't expect that. I thought you were going to say, I think you're completely wrong in what you just said. That's the kind of pushback I was expecting. I think that's a wonderful and delightful question to ask. And I'm guessing that there's a sea of people who are listening to this going, yeah, I definitely couldn't ask that question. So part of what I am out to do when I'm working with any organizations or any group, or if I'm doing a keynote or whatever it is I am wanting to empower people to be able to communicate what's important to them, ask for what they want, make a case for as well as for what they want. And, a lot of people need to navigate how they're going to move their careers, which includes negotiating for bonuses and compensation and things like that. So part of it, just underneath all of that, is learning to ask for what we want. And when we can situate and learn to be able to say, I really want to have a strong relationship with you, Dave, my boss. This job is important to me. I love working here. And I'd like to be able to share a few things that really make a difference for me and how I show up and I can give my best with you. And a simple thing is because I value kindness and I value feeling like I'm connected to you, it would mean a lot if we could start part of start our day just connecting on that level before we jump into the to-do list, whatever. And so you socialize, and essentially what you're doing is you are training your boss to communicate and behave in a way that works for you. And then you reward them reinforce that behavior by saying, thank you. Gosh, I know you stopped, you intervened in your usual way of charging it, and you asked me how I felt. And that meant so much to me. So if you can situate the context of why you're doing this, it really makes a huge difference. And I can tell you, Dave, in all the years that I have been helping organizations to measure and improve their employee engagement, one of the variables that we see consistently on the engagement surveys that brings people's engagement score down is that they don't feel seen. They don't feel seen or acknowledged by their leaders, who are literally walking down the hallway past them without even looking or saying hello or even smiling. It's like they don't even exist. And so that's the kind of thing, if we can start to elevate these, this civilization, if you will, of our workplaces, I think it would go a really long way. And so if we can empower individuals to learn to say what would make a difference for them and their performance and their connection in a way that's respectful and is trying to build the culture, I think this goes a long, long way for everyone to be better in this deal.
Yeah, love the way you address that, because I think as I'm listening to that, I'm thinking, yeah, that's doable, and it's great context and great background. And I was thinking, as you were saying that to myself, I was thinking, look, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and just treat people the way you want to be treated. And I was reminded, my colleague Beth Renga, who always likes to say, don't treat people the way you want to be treated, treat people the way they want to be treated.
Yes.
And that's really what you're driving at here, and that's really a great point.
Yeah, and to distinguish that, Dave, I do talk about that in my workshops and my programs. So the whole notion of treat people the way that you want to be treated is the golden rule, and that's what a lot of people think that they're doing. And then the opportunity is to go for the platinum rule, which is forget that. Treat them the way that they want to be treated. And when you do that, you necessarily step out of yourself and out of your own preferences and what you like and your defaults. Now you're reaching across to the other side to the other person. And now what you've done is you've started to alter the molecules between the two of you, the energy field, if you will, between the two of you. And that changes really everything. It changes how they trust you, how they want to come and perform for you, how they talk about you when you're not around. That small little wave is a huge ripple.
Yeah, for sure. And for any of the cynics out there who are listening to this and rolling their eyes and talking to you right now, if you don't believe that what we're talking about here matters, check out the conversation I had with the guys from Irrational Capital. This stuff actually moves the needle and drives your business value. It's connected. There's science, there's research, there's empirical data all around this. And that's why we focus on these kinds of subjects. So, Alise, let's talk a little bit about culture. Everybody wants the great culture. I've heard so many stories about how to do it and why it matters and so forth, but I'd love to get your perspective on how to build that winning culture where everybody's rowing in the same direction and in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to say to that, Dave, that's really important, and again, this is where we have to give so much compassion to leaders, is whatever culture currently exists in your organization is a direct reflection of the top leader. That's exactly who the leader is. That's what's going on. This is what this person is, either who this person really is or what this person has allowed, to permeate the organization. So we have to start that this is a mirroring exercise. And so the first thing is, we have to, what I like to do with my clients is I like to first start with, let's talk about your purpose, mission, vision, and values. Why does your organization exist and why should anybody care? So the answers to those questions are not to make large quantities of money. That is a side product of living your purpose well. So once we go through the exercises, why do your organization actually exist? Why should anybody care? Then we go into, and what's your mission? How are you actually providing a product or services and distinguishing yourself by living in that purpose? And of course, the vision is, what future state does the world look like when you have really well exercised that purpose? And how does the world look different? And that is an aspirational, inspirational vision that should pull people out of their chairs, whatever it is that you're doing. And then, of course, your values. Do we value directness at all cost here? Do we value being right? Do we value accuracy? Do we value being on time? Whatever those things are. Once you are really clear about those things, then you could start to embed those kinds of what would people be doing and saying if they're adhering to those things, the purpose, mission, vision, and values. Then you can start to embed that in the organization and start to look for ways to encourage it through artifacts, through reinforcement, through communication. Maybe you've got a mascot or something that embodies that. And then you start to reward and recognize people for living these things and calling that way. The people that come on new are going, oh, this is what gets you praise here. I see. I know what to do. I'm following. I'm tracking. But beyond all that, I could tell you that you can even measure the experience of purpose in your organization and even the values, so that you can track that and monitor it, and then be able to use it as an operational imperative to keep you on track and going the direction that you want to be, not the natural direction of whatever the force momentum of the organization has been. I said a lot there, so let me stop and let you comment or ask other questions.
Well, sure. And first of all, I think it's really cool that you can track it and monitor it and measure it, because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? That's what they always tell you. But I want to talk a little bit more about leadership starting at the top and culture starting at the top, because I firmly believe that you've got to start with the intention and the commitment to do it. I had a guest on the program here a while ago who mentioned that culture is local. And by that, he was referring to that if somebody on the 8th floor didn't get the same memo that you got on the 4th floor, it could be a completely different environment up there. So in the world, especially of well, not even, I was going to say in privately held businesses, but I'm going to retract that. Period. All companies. When you've got somebody who is in charge of the organization, like, to your point, their personality, their traits, what their values are, old school, new school, what have you, how do you make that, mold those various characteristics into something that you want? Because one individual can't possess all of the things that you want the organization to embody. So, for one example, I'm working with a business owner right now, great person, individual, humble, but a scatterbrain and bad records. And I've got to imagine that culture is a little bit awkward inside that organization as a result of that. So how do you reel all of that stuff in?
Geez, just go for the zinger question. All right, Dave.
I didn't know where that was going when I started flapping my gums, I promise you.
No, it's great. It's a really great question. And I can guarantee you that anybody who's, in a more of a senior level leadership role is asking that exact same question. How do we reel all this stuff in? The first thing that I would like to say about that, and I don't mean this to sound self-serving for either one of us, but I really do believe that you do need somebody from the outside just to be able to help show you what this looks like. And so that you can actually see, because you get so used to, oh, well, that's just Scott. That's how he talks. So, well,
Right.
Darla, that's her way. That's what she does. But when you can look at it and you can have somebody else on the outside go, well, here's what I'm seeing. Like, for example, I came into an organization and I couldn't understand why their senior level leadership was not jiving and with their next level of leadership, and that next lower level down didn't trust them. And when I came in and I could start to have conversations with them, it was abundantly clear to me that there is a parent-child dynamic going on in this organization. So there's mom and dad say yes or no to something, and then the other people get punished when they don't adhere to that. Huge. They had no idea that this was in existence, and yet it was rampant. So I do think in order to get on top of all of that, you have got to get some perspective about how your organization is showing up and, kind of what its components are, so you can see it. Because now what happens, you take it from the unconscious, and now you can bring it up into the conscious level. Now we can do something about it. But you can't see what you can't see. Like, I can't see that I have this really cute bald spot in the back of my head, maybe. Somebody else could see that, though. The other thing that's really interesting, Dave, that is showing up in some of my more recent interviews too, is one way that you can start to get a finger on this is systematically start to ask anybody new in the organization to tell you, how would you describe this organization? What do you see when you walked in? You're brand new. Say in 3 words, how would you describe this organization? How would you describe leadership? And you start hearing this stuff, and you had no idea when people start saying, well, if they're honest, maybe it's a survey, it's militaristic. Really? I thought we were very, very, very compassionate here. So I think really importantly, you've got to first get these different perspectives, and you got to get outside of your own viewpoint and your own way of seeing things to be able to understand first just even how it's being experienced and being described.
Yeah, well said. I think you've got to have a mirror held up to you because a lot of times you've got those buzzwords on the walls that were hung up 25 years ago
Yeah.
um, by somebody who preceded you and preceded your
Correct.
predecessor, and you think that's who you are and that's who we are as an organization. But when you start to ask the questions, you start to really understand it. Maybe that's not quite the case. Um, do you have a few more minutes, Alise? We're already at the end of the program theoretically, but I'm having so
I'm
much fun
delighted
with
to
you. Can we
dance
chat
with
for
you.
a little
No,
bit longer?
I've got time.
Cool, thanks. I want to ask you about the Working on Purpose podcast. Tell us about what that is and where we can all find.
So today, now it's been on air for 10 and a half years. So today it's really a thought leadership platform that advances the conversation on creating places that people actually want to come to work and do their best. And so there is a lot of focus on leadership culture, but also a tremendous amount on even the kinds of stuff we're talking about here, which is how do we create healthier, happier, more thriving humans. And so I generally only bring on authors. And then my practice is, as you might already guess about me, Dave, is I read their book cover to cover in preparation for the conversation. And that's for my own edification and learning. Take about 25 to 50 pages of typewritten notes each week. And then that becomes research for my books or my talks or other things, or how I continue to consult with my clients. And then we have a conversation about usually over 15 topics from that reading. We then write a LinkedIn newsletter the next week about how you can apply what we talked about. So that's what the show is about. You can find it pretty much anywhere you find your podcasts, whether that's on Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever. My YouTube channel it's actually, because it's old enough, it's called the Working on Purpose Radio with Alise Cortez.
There's a
Because
lot of
that's how we
cachet about
started.
using the word radio in these shows these days.
I'm sorry?
There's a lot of cachet in using the word radio in
Oh,
these
there
shows
is.
these days.
Thank
Yes,
goodness.
what's old is new again. So
Okay, good.
embrace that.
Thank you for that, Dave.
Surely. And you've got a couple of books over your shoulder there. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about those?
Yeah. So the first one came out in 2020. Purpose Ignited is really about really helping people to awaken to their own passion and purpose and start them down the path of becoming an inspirational leader. It's also the basis of my Managing Through Meaning program that I do for organizations. The next one that's over there, The Great Revitalization, is a more recent book that I really wrote to help leaders understand what we've been talking about in today's conversation, Dave. What is going on with today's workforce's hearts, minds? What do they want from their work? How can we best engage them? How do we behave as leaders and create a culture that makes them want to stay and give their best? And then I provide 22 best practices that you can embed into your culture to create or start on the path of becoming that culture of gusto. So those are two. And then I have a couple of books that really came along as life unfolded. One is called Passionately Striving and Why. And a publisher friend of mine came to me and said, "Hey, I want to release a series of anthologies. I want one to be on women. I would love for you to curate it. I don't care what you focus on." And I said, "Well, that's easy. The focus will be on purpose." And so what was really fun about that project, Dave, was I did not want that anthology collection of 25 stories to be about a bunch of women who look like me. So I went and consulted my dear friend LinkedIn, and I went trolling about the planet for people that sounded like what they were doing when they described themselves as being purposeful. And I did it by different company or countries. So I then would enroll the women into the project. They shared their stories. So we have stories from Australia to Zambia. And it was all about how do they discover their purpose and how are they now serving from it today. So it's meant to be inspiring and enrolling the people that read the book. One other book, there's one other as well, is called Coloring Life, How Loss Invites Us to Live More Vibrant Lives. And that book, Dave, I wrote and released in 2023, a few years after both of my parents passed 28 days apart. And so that book is twofold. It's the very, very personal front row story of what it was like for me. You're with me as I'm going through the process of losing both of my parents and all that it takes to go through all that. So part of that is designed to help people who are going through or have gone through loss, to help deal with that as well, to help them work through the emotions. They cry with it. It's the only book that I have that is an audio version as well. And then the second part of the book is the 7 whispers of wisdom that I learned about living life more fully as a result of those losses. And then the last book is called The Power of Soulful Healing, Turning Wounds into Wisdom, which I co-wrote with Arthur Cyril McCauley, and who's a clinical psychologist. I'm an organizational psychologist. And that is really designed to help the readers navigate through their own lives, to first recognize that every single human being on the planet is walking wounded. How do we get access to and understand our wounds so that we can start to heal those and live a bigger, fuller life? So it's really much about, it's very, very, lots of stories in there, lots of examples. It's really, really rich, lots of assessments that you can take for yourself.
Lots of great resources, the books, the podcast, wonderful stuff. Tell the audience how they can connect with you if they want to learn more about you, or if they can work with you.
Yeah, I'd love to engage with your listeners. If this conversation has been amazing. A couple ways. You can go straight to my business website, which is gusto-now.com. There's a dash between those two words. You can find all kinds of resources there, my books, my podcast, etc. And there's a way to connect with me as well. But you can also go and find me on LinkedIn. If you reach out to me and say, I heard you on a Dave Bookbinder's show, I'd love to connect with you. I will be happy to do that and engage in a conversation. I'd say those are the 2 easiest ways right out of the gate.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. Love what you're doing, Alise. Keep it up. Keep being the champion for all of us out there. So, and thank you so much for joining us today on Behind the Numbers.
Thank you for a marvelous conversation and for hosting such a great thought leadership conversation.
I appreciate the kind words. Great having you here. And thank you out there for listening to Behind the Numbers. I really appreciate your support. Thank you, and thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review. That really does matter in helping other folks find the show as well. Until next time, my name is Dave Bookbinder, reminding you that the numbers tell the story, but the people bring it to life. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.